lawsuit against Shannon Sharpe, the former NFL player.
Right. And what makes this one particularly interesting, maybe, is how it started versus where it is now.
Exactly. The core issue here is a lawsuit alleging rape and other serious misconduct, but it comes after what the lawsuit itself calls a rocky consensual relationship that went on for nearly 2 years.
So the really serious allegations seem to crop up later in that timeline.
That seems to be the narrative presented in the lawsuit, yes.
Okay. So for this deep dive, we've looked at reports from places like AP News, Times of India, NBC, CBS News.
And we also checked out a Reddit thread on RNFL just to see the kind of public chatter, plus a legal analysis from the Sanders firm PC, which gives some deeper context.
Our mission here, just to be clear, isn't to play judge or jury. We want to unpack the timeline, the claims, the defenses, based on these sources.
And explore some of the tougher questions this raises about consent, accusations, and how the public sees these things, especially when it's someone well-known.
Okay, so let's get into it. Where did this all begin? The relationship itself.
Well, according to the lawsuit documents, they met back in 2023. She was 20 at the time, met him at a gym in Los Angeles.
And the lawsuit specifically uses that phrase.
Yeah.
Nearly 2-year relationship.
Yeah, and crucially, it adds that description, rocky consensual, for the initial phase. That starting point, that it was consensual at first, seems pretty central to understanding the whole picture here.
Right, but obviously something changed, according to the plaintiff. What are the specific things she's alleging happened later on?
The most serious allegations are 2 instances of alleged rape, one said to have happened in October 2024 and another in January 2025. But it doesn't stop there. The suit also claims physical force was used, and that Sharpe inflicted emotional distress, both intentionally and through negligence or recklessness.
Ow.
And beyond those specific events, the complaint alleges a pattern over time, like increasing verbal abuse, controlling behavior, even violence. There's mention of a death threat.
A death threat. That's incredibly serious.
It is. And there's another layer to an accusation that he recorded sexual encounters without her authorization.
Okay, those are some heavy claims.
Uh-huh.
What's Shannon Sharpe's side of the story? How has he responded?
Through his lawyer, Lanny J. Davis, Sharpe has flat out denied everything, unequivocally.
Just a total denial.
Total denial. Their stance is the relationship was always consensual, period. And they're framing this lawsuit as, Davis called it a blatant and cynical attempt to shake down Sharpe for millions.
Shakedown.
Yeah.
Strong words.
Very strong. And they've already said they intend to countersue for defamation.
Which brings us to the lawyers. It sounds like both sides have brought in, well, some heavy hitters.
Oh, yeah. For the plaintiff, it's Tony Busby. He's got a reputation for taking on these high-profile sexual misconduct cases. Think Deshaun Watson, Sean Diddy Combs. His involvement usually signals they're prepared for a fight.
And on Sharpe's side?
Lanny J. Davis. He's known more as a crisis management lawyer, lots of connections, especially in D.C. The fact they immediately announced a plan to countersue for defamation, that signals a very aggressive defense strategy.
Okay, let's talk about evidence, because that's been a big part of the public discussion. There's talk of video and audio.
Right. Busby, the plaintiff's lawyer, mentioned what he called a damning 10-minute video clip, but apparently only about 30 seconds of it has been described publicly.
Just a small piece.
Yeah, and Sharpe's team is pushing back hard on that, saying it's totally misleading out of context. They're demanding the whole thing be released.
And the audio.
There's also an audio recording where a voice, believed to be Sharpe's, apparently makes some threatening remarks. Again, the defense says, it's just part of a consensual argument taken out of context. Context seems to be the key word for the defense here.
Then there was that Instagram Live incident back in September 2024. How does that fit in?
That definitely seems significant. Sharpe accidentally went live and broadcast audio of a sexual encounter.
Oops.
Yeah, big oops. He first claimed he was hacked, but then admitted it was his mistake and apologized publicly.
How did that affect things?
Well, reports suggest the plaintiff was really embarrassed by it and that it was a major factor in the relationship breaking down. Some sources even imply it might have been like the spark that led to where things are now.
Before the lawsuit was actually filed, were there any attempts to sort this out privately? Settlement talks?
It seems so. Reports mention discussions happening early in 2025. Sharpe's lawyers have actually claimed the plaintiff turned down a $10 million settlement offer before she filed the suit on April 18th.
$10 million. Wow. Okay, so the suit gets filed April 18th. What happened next?
Well, just a few days later, around April 21st, 22nd, Things got messy. Reports say both sides started leaking things to the media, text messages, other bits of information, trying to shape the story.
Right. The court of public opinion kicking in.
Pretty much.
Let's pivot to the legal side a bit more. We know it's a civil suit, not criminal. What are the actual legal claims listed in the lawsuit?
Okay, so legally speaking, the claims include rape, which usually falls under sexual battery and assault in civil court, then regular battery for the alleged physical force.
Uh-huh.
Also, intentional infliction of emotional distress and negligent or reckless infliction of emotional distress. And finally, that unauthorized filming claim, which could potentially violate state laws about non-consensual recording or sharing of intimate images, sometimes called revenge porn laws.
And it's key to remember you mentioned no criminal charges have been filed.
Crucial point. This is all civil court for now. The burden of proof is different, lower than beyond a reasonable doubt in criminal cases.
And Sharpe's team is hitting back with this defamation threat. How easy or difficult is it for a public figure like him to actually win a defamation case?
It's tough, really tough. Because he's a public figure, he has to prove something called actual malice.
Actual malice. What does that mean exactly?
It means he'd have to show the plaintiff made these allegedly false statements either knowing they were false or with a reckless disregard for the truth, like just not caring if they were true or false. It's a very high bar. Simple disagreements about what happened usually aren't enough.
Okay.
And that Sanders firm analysis we mentioned, they also brought up something called Anti-SLAPP statutes.
Anti-SLAPP.
Yeah, SLAPP stands for Strategic Lawsuit Against Public Participation. These laws exist in some places to protect people from being sued, just to shut them up when they're speaking out on public issues. It's possible those laws could come into play with Sharpe's countersuit threat.
Interesting. Okay, this whole thing has definitely got people talking. What's the general vibe out there based on what we've seen?
It's really divided. If you look at that Reddit thread, for example, you see all sorts of opinions.
Like what?
Well, some people are definitely skeptical of the accuser. They float ideas like, maybe she's targeting him because he's famous, or the timing seems suspicious with his new podcast deal, that kind of thing. But then others are looking at the bits of alleged evidence that have come out, like the mention of the video or audio, and they're saying, hey, this looks concerning.
And what about the fact she apparently stayed in contact with him after the first alleged incident? Does that come up?
Yes, that point gets raised quite a bit in the discussions that she continued contact after the alleged October 2024 rape, including another reported encounter in January 2025. For some people, that raises questions or complexities about the narrative.
And Sharpe himself has stepped back from ESPN for now.
Yeah, he announced he's temporarily stepping away to deal with the lawsuit, which, shows how seriously this is impacting his career, regardless of the outcome.
That Sanders firm analysis seems to offer some useful ways to think about all this.
Yeah.
What were their main points?
They brought up some really good, broader points. One was just how tricky consent gets, especially now with digital stuff, recording, sharing, all that, and how consent gets looked at even more closely when there's maybe a power imbalance in the relationship.
Right. Power dynamic.
Exactly. They also talked about the trial by media phenomenon, how pretrial publicity can sway public opinion, and how lawyers on both sides might actually use that strategically.
Makes sense.
And they mentioned the idea of weaponization of defamation, basically using countersuits as a tactic, which seems relevant here given Sharpe's lawyer's announcement.
Did they touch on any societal factors, biases?
They did. They discussed how, unfortunately, things like racial stereotypes or gender norms can sometimes affect who people find believable in these situations. And they even drew some parallels between tactics sometimes used in these cases, denying, discrediting the accuser, selectively releasing info, and tactics allegedly used by institutions, like the NYPD was mentioned as an example, when facing misconduct allegations. It kind of suggests these individual cases can tap into bigger societal patterns.
Okay, so if we try to, boil all this down from the different sources.
Yeah.
What are the absolute key takeaways right now?
All right, let's summarize. First, there's a civil lawsuit against Shannon Sharpe alleging very serious things, including rape, that reportedly happened within what started as a consensual, if rocky, relationship.
Got it.
Second, Sharpe completely denies it all. He calls it a shakedown and says he's going to sue for defamation.
Okay.
Third, we've got big-name lawyers on both sides, and there's disputed digital evidence, video, audio, where the context and completeness are major sticking points.
Right, the disputed evidence.
Fourth, super important reminder, no criminal charges have been filed. This is a civil fight about consent, privacy, reputation, money. Fifth, public opinion is all over the place. which kind of mirrors how society often reacts to accusations against famous people.
Yeah, definitely seeing that.
And finally, this whole situation really highlights that messy intersection of the legal system, how the media covers things, and how public perception gets formed, especially in these kinds of sensitive cases today.
It's definitely multifaceted. You look at the sources,
Hmm.
and you see very different stories being told. And the legal wheels are still turning.
Absolutely. And again, our goal here was just to lay out what the different sources are saying, the claims and counterclaims, without trying to decide who's right or wrong.
Yeah, just trying to understand the landscape.
Which leads to maybe something for you, the listener, to think about. When you see cases like this play out with these conflicting stories and all the media attention, what do you find is the hardest part in trying to figure out what might have actually happened? Like, how much does that intense spotlight maybe change how things unfold, even legally? And with everything being so digital now, how are we supposed to think about consent when recordings and texts and DMs become part of the evidence?
Those are big questions. Definitely things to chew on as this case develops and, well, just in general as we see more situations like this.
For sure. Lots to consider.